served on a U.S. submarine in the 1970s. We stalked Soviet boats for weeks, but one night, the ocean went silent, and something started stalking us instead. The Cold War wasn't just fought in the air and on land. Beneath the waves, it was a constant game of shadows. Soviet subs were prowling everywhere, and our job was to find them, follow them, and if the day ever came, be ready to destroy them before they could destroy us. I was a sonar operator, one of the men who spent endless hours in the dark room, listening for whispers of steel hulls and propeller screws through the endless static of the sea. It was exhausting work. Every noise meant something. A pod of whales could sound like a convoy if you weren't careful. Merchant ships, trawlers, even the scrape of shifting ice could trick your ears. But when it was real, when you caught the steady, mechanical beat of a submarine screw, you felt it in your gut. You knew. And then the game began. We were somewhere in the North Atlantic when it happened. Our captain had been tracking what we believed was a Soviet Victor-class sub for 3 days straight. We'd been running deep, silent, careful not to give ourselves away. The air in the boat was heavy with sweat and metal, and every man aboard knew we were playing a dangerous game. One mistake, and the hunter could become hunted. But that night, just past 2 o'clock in the morning, something changed. I was on watch at sonar, headphones tied against my ears, my eyes scanning the glowing green scopes. The ocean had a rhythm, a background hum you learned to live with. The distant roar of the Atlantic, faint echoes of life miles away, the occasional burst of static as currents shifted. But all at once it went quiet. Too quiet. At first, I thought the system had failed. I tapped the console, checked the lines. Everything was working, but there was nothing. No whales. No distant ships. Even the Soviet sub we'd been tracking gone. The ocean wasn't supposed to sound like that. It felt like the world had stopped breathing. Then I heard it. At first, it was faint, like a heartbeat in the water. Not mechanical. Organic. Thump. Thump. Slow, steady. It didn't match any signature I'd ever logged. I adjusted the filters, thinking it was distortion. But it grew louder, closer. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't whales. It was something else. Something big. Contact. The captain's voice cut in from behind me, sharp and low. I swallowed, unsure of what to say. Sir, it's not a sub. Not anything I recognize. He leaned in, studying the traces on the scope. His brow furrowed. Mark it anyway. The crew around me shifted uncomfortably. Nobody liked uncertainty down here. The ocean was dangerous enough without ghosts on sonar. The heartbeat continued for nearly 10 minutes, always at the edge of our range. Every time I thought it was fading, it surged back, closer than before. And then it stopped, cut off, like someone had thrown a switch. The silence after was worse than the sound itself. That was when we felt it. The boat shuddered, just a slight tremor, like a hand brushing along the hull. Every man froze. In those depths, any contact with the hull could mean disaster. But this wasn't the scrape of rock or ice. It was deliberate, smooth, slow, like something was feeling its way along our submarine, testing us. The captain ordered us deeper, into the black. The engines hummed at their lowest setting as we slipped silently down. The water pressure grew heavier, groaning against the steel around us. I held my breath, straining to hear. And then, faintly, the heartbeat returned. Only this time, it wasn't distant. It was right there, outside. Men exchanged nervous glances. Nobody said it, but we were all thinking the same thing. If this was the Soviets, they had technology we couldn't even imagine. Some new kind of sub, silent, alive in the water in ways we weren't. But deep down, I didn't believe it. I'd spent years cataloging propellers, screws, hull echoes. This wasn't man-made. The captain's knuckles were white on the periscope handles, even though we were far too deep to use it. Maintain silence, he ordered, his voice tight. Nobody breathes louder than the engines. We drifted in that crushing dark for what felt like hours. The heartbeat faded again, then surged back, circling us, closer each time. Sometimes it came from above, sometimes below. Once, I swore it came from inside the hull itself. My headset crackled with the faint sound of something else. Not just a heartbeat, a dragging noise, a low moan, too deep for human lungs. Operator, the captain hissed. Report. I opened my mouth, but no words came. How do you report something that shouldn't exist? Then it was gone, just like that. The ocean came alive again, the hum of currents, the chatter of distant life, the mechanical beat of the Soviet victor we'd been hunting. Everything normal, as if nothing had happened. But it wasn't normal. Not for me. Not for anyone who heard it. When we surfaced days later, the men were restless, pale. Nobody spoke about it openly, but I saw the looks, the quiet whispers in the mess, the way men flinched at sudden noises. We all knew what we'd felt. Something had found us down there. Something not in any naval manual. Something that didn't belong to the Cold War, or to mankind. And I had the sonar logs to prove it. But when I tried to replay them, the section was blank. The entire 10 minutes of silence, the heartbeat, the scrape, it was all gone. Erased. Replaced with static. Only I remembered what I'd heard. And maybe the others. But if they did, none of them would admit it. Not in official reports. Not in front of command. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. That whatever was out there in the black, it had touched us for a reason. And that the Cold War wasn't the only war being fought beneath the sea. The weeks after that incident blurred together. Patrols always did. Long days of silence. The claustrophobic hum of machinery. The stale recycled air pressing down on us until you forgot what sunlight looked like. But no matter how routine things became, I couldn't get the memory out of my head. The heartbeat in the water, the scrape along the hull, the blank section of sonar tape. The Navy never allowed ghosts on its records. We were ordered back out, this time further north, toward the icy waters near the Barents Sea. It was hostile territory, Soviet waters, their submarines slipping beneath the surface like wolves in the dark. Our mission was simple: shadow one of their ballistic missile subs, a Delta class, without being detected. It was the kind of work that demanded nerves of steel. One mistake, one slip of sound, and they'd know we were there. But I carried with me the fear that something else already knew. On the third night of the patrol, I caught the faint mechanical beat of the Delta. It was clean, steady, classic Soviet engineering. We began shadowing them at a cautious distance, tracking their every move. The captain was tense but focused, his eyes locked on the charts. This was familiar ground. This was the Cold War as we knew it. Then the ocean went silent again. It happened the same way it had before. One moment the sonar was alive with the chatter of the sea. The next it was a void. No whales. No currents. Not even the Delta's screws. Just silence. My blood turned to ice. Lost contact. I whispered into the mic. The captain turned slowly toward me. His face was pale in the dim red light. Repeat. Lost contact. Everything. It's all gone. The room grew colder, as if the steel around us had thickened. The crew shifted uneasily. Nobody wanted to hear this again. Not here. Not now. And then came the heartbeat. Thump. Thump. This time it was louder. Closer. My headset vibrated with it, rattling my skull. It didn't fade in and out like before. It surged all at once, as though it had been waiting for us. God Almighty, one of the younger operators muttered, crossing himself under his breath. The captain barked for silence. His voice was firm, but I could hear the fear underneath. Maintain course. Do not respond. Do not acknowledge. We drifted deeper, trying to slip below whatever was out there. But the heartbeat followed, always just outside, always circling. The hull groaned under the pressure, and then came that sound again, the scraping, deliberate, methodical. Something sliding along our submarine, testing the seams. Men clenched their jaws, white-knuckled on their consoles. Nobody dared to breathe. And then another noise. It wasn't a heartbeat. It was a voice. At first I thought it was feedback, distortion in the system. But no, the sound was too clear. A low, drawn-out moan that reverberated through the water, through the hull, through my bones. It wasn't in English or Russian or any language I knew. It was older, deeper, vibrating in a way that made the fillings in my teeth ache. One of the crew tore off his headset, trembling. "It's inside my head," he whispered. The captain slammed his hand on the console. "No one leaves their post. We ride it out. Do you hear me?" But I could see it in his eyes. He was rattled too. The moan grew louder, rising into a distorted wail that seemed to come from every direction. The lights flickered. Somewhere in the boat, metal creaked like something bending under strain. Men began muttering prayers, their lips pale and tight. And then, just as suddenly as it came, the sound vanished. The ocean roared back to life in my headset, currents, wails, the faint steady beat of the Delta's propellers. Everything was normal again. Everything except us. The captain ordered us to break off, shadowing the Soviets, and retreat to deeper waters. No explanation. No report filed. Just a quiet command and a silence that hung heavier than lead. For days after, the crew barely spoke. Meals were eaten in silence, men staring at their trays like they weren't even hungry. Sleep came in fragments. Every clang of the hull, every distant groan of metal sent shivers through us. But it wasn't over. One night, nearly a week later, the alarms blared. I was ripped from shallow sleep by the sound of klaxons and men shouting in the corridors. I stumbled to my station, the captain already there, his face grim. "We've got company," he said flatly. On the scopes, the Delta was gone. In its place were multiple contacts. Too many. They surrounded us on all sides, closing fast. Soviet subs didn't travel in packs like that. Not this close, not this aggressive. And then I realized they weren't Soviet. Their signatures didn't make sense. No propeller screws, no engine hum, just silence. Dozens of them, circling, tightening the noose. The heartbeat returned. Not one this time, many. Overlapping, pulsing, echoing through the water. The captain's hand shook as he gripped the console. All ahead full. Get us out of here. Engines roared, the boat surging forward into the black. The hull rattled as if the ocean itself was trying to hold us back. Men shouted as depth gauges swung wildly. Something slammed against the stern with a force that made the whole sub lurch sideways. "Collision alarm," someone screamed. But there was nothing there. No wreckage, no rocks. Just water, and something in it. The sonar erupted in chaos, blips flaring across the screen, moving in ways no submarine could. Too fast, too fluid. They darted and twisted, vanishing and reappearing at impossible angles. The crew was panicking, shouting over one another, desperate to make sense of it. And then, in the chaos, one voice cut through. It wasn't on the comms. It wasn't on the sonar. It was inside the boat. Inside us. "You shouldn't be here." 3 words, low and guttural, whispered in every man's ear at once. The lights went out. The lights went out, plunging the submarine into a suffocating blackness. Only the emergency glow strips along the deck flickered weakly, casting the passageways in a sickly red glow. Men shouted, stumbling over each other in the dark, their voices tight with panic. The heartbeat thundered in my headset, so loud it rattled my teeth. I tore it off, but it didn't matter. I could still hear it. We all could. It wasn't a sound anymore. It was inside the hull, inside our chests, a rhythm not our own. The captain's voice rose above the chaos, steady but strained. "Damage control. Get the lights back. Helm, keep her steady." But the helm didn't answer. I turned, and the helmsman was frozen in place, his eyes wide, his hands still on the controls. His lips moved silently, like he was whispering to someone only he could hear. Then his face twisted in terror, and he screamed. The sound wasn't human. It was high, raw, torn from his throat like something had reached in and dragged it out of him. He collapsed, convulsing, blood trickling from his ears. Men rushed to him, but the captain barked them back. "Leave him. Stations." That was when the first strike hit. The whole sub shuddered, a metallic groan echoing through the hull as though a giant hand had squeezed it. Panels rattled loose. Pipes hissed. Someone shouted about a breach, but no water came. The pressure gauges danced wildly, then froze. The sonar flared alive, even without power. The screen glowed green, lines racing across it as blips swarmed us from all directions. They moved too fast, circling, darting, colliding with our wake. And then I saw it. For just a fraction of a second, a shape appeared on the scope. Enormous. Longer than any submarine I'd ever seen. It wasn't steel. It was irregular, jagged like bone or rock. Its outline pulsed, shifting as though alive. Then it was gone, replaced by static. I whispered before I could stop myself. "It's not Russian." No one answered. They didn't need to. They'd all seen it too. The captain slammed his fist on the console, his voice breaking for the first time. "Reactor, full power. Get us out." The submarine roared, surging forward. The hull trembled under the strain, every bolt screaming against the deep. But the faster we moved, the closer the heartbeats came. Louder, faster, multiplying until it felt like we were inside a living creature's ribcage. Then came the scratching. It wasn't one scrape anymore. It was dozens, claws raking along the hull, tapping, probing. Men covered their ears, but it didn't help. The sound was everywhere, inside the steel inside our skulls. The emergency lights flickered again, and for the first time I saw it. Not outside, inside. For just an instant, in the blood-red glow of the corridor, something tall and wrong stood between us. Its body was slick, glistening like oil, its limbs too long, bending at unnatural angles. Its eyes, or what passed for them, glowed faintly, like dying embers. And then it blinked out, gone as if it had never been. But the smell lingered, salt and rot, like something pulled from the bottom of the sea. "Did you?" One of the crew whispered, but he didn't finish. The thing reappeared behind him, its arm, or fin, shooting forward. He screamed as his body lifted off the ground, slammed into the bulkhead with a wet crack, then vanished with it into thin air. The corridor was empty again. Only the blood remained. Men broke. Some prayed aloud. Others clawed at the hatches, desperate to escape 100 meters under the sea. The captain drew his sidearm, firing into the dark, the shots deafening in the confined space. But there was nothing to hit, nothing to fight. I wanted to run, to hide, but my station held me frozen. My eyes drifted to the sonar again. The scope was filled now, the blips pressed tight against our hull. And in the center, pulsing in rhythm with a heartbeat, was that massive shape, larger than any submarine, larger than us all. The boat groaned. The steel bowed inward. Water burst from a seam above, spraying down like rain. We were being crushed. "Below ballast," the captain screamed. "Surface now." The emergency systems howled, tanks venting, the submarine lurching upward. The hull shook as if fighting against the ocean itself. Depth gauges spun. Men braced for impact. The heartbeats grew deafening, faster, pounding in time with the boat's shutters. My chest felt like it would explode. My vision blurred. The corridor swam with shadows. Figures, dozens of them, long-limbed, slick-skinned, flickered in and out of sight, surrounding us. And then, just as we neared the surface, everything stopped. The pressure eased. The scraping vanished. The sonar cleared. The sub broke the surface with a violent crash, throwing men to the floor. Alarms screamed. Water sloshed. The deck tilted hard before leveling out. For a moment, there was only the sound of the wind and the slap of waves against the hull. We had made it. The captain staggered to his feet, his face ashen, his eyes bloodshot. "Status report," he rasped. But no one answered. Too many men were gone. Too many empty stations. I glanced at the sonar logs, my hands trembling. Blank. Static. Everything from the blackout to the breach erased. Again, only the blood on the floor told me it had been real. The captain looked at me, his jaw clenched, his voice low. "This never happened. Do you understand?" I nodded, but I knew better. Something down there had let us go, and I was terrified of the day it decided not to. We limped back to port in silence. The submarine was battered but intact, her steel bones groaning with every wave. Inside, though, the crew was shattered. We'd lost good men, some simply gone, taken in ways that couldn't be explained. Others were alive but broken, staring blankly at the walls, whispering prayers under their breath. The official report was brief. Unexpected contact with Soviet vessels. Possible near collision. Systems malfunction. Nothing about the blackout. Nothing about the voices. Nothing about the things we'd seen. The captain made sure of it. We were gathered in the mess before disembarkation, the men hollow-eyed, uniforms still damp with salt and fear. The captain stood at the front, his voice firm, his eyes hard. "This mission never happened. Whatever you think you saw, whatever you think you heard, it stays here. You speak of it outside these walls, you'll lose more than your career. You'll be branded a liability, a traitor. Do I make myself clear?" No one argued. No one wanted to. The unspoken truth was worse than any punishment. We weren't sure anyone would believe us. When I finally set foot on dry land again, the sunlight felt foreign, unreal. The city bustled with life, cars, laughter, radios playing pop songs. A world that had no idea what waited in the depths. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt hunted. That night, I woke drenched in sweat, heart pounding. I dreamed of the sonar again. The massive, jagged shape pulsing in the dark, its heartbeat matching mine until I couldn't tell which belonged to who. When I pressed my ear to the wall of my quarters, I swore I heard it again. Faint, slow, deliberate. Thump, thump. I wasn't alone. Weeks passed, but the crew couldn't escape it. One man drank himself into the hospital. Another went AWOL. 2 others turned up dead. One hanging in his garage, the other drowned in a shallow river, as though he'd walked willingly into the water. Each time I read the reports, I remembered their faces in the sub, the way they had looked into the dark as though it was looking back. Then came the summons. I was ordered to a debriefing at a naval facility I'd never heard of, buried in the woods miles from the coast. The room was stark, concrete walls, a single table, 2 men in suits who didn't introduce themselves. CIA maybe, or something worse. They asked me about the patrol, about the Soviets, about the blackout. I stuck to the official report, my voice even rehearsed. But one of the men leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. And what about the anomalies? The word hung heavy. My chest tightened. Sir, I don't know what you mean. He studied me for a long moment, then slid a folder across the table. Inside were sonar logs. Not ours, but Soviet. Grainy photographs of submarine crews, their faces gaunt, eyes wide with the same terror I'd seen in my own men. Reports of phantom contacts, blackouts, ships crippled without reason, crews vanishing without trace. It wasn't just us. The other man spoke for the first time, his voice low. This is bigger than the Cold War. Whatever's out there, both sides have seen it. And both sides are lying. My stomach churned. I want to ask questions, but their eyes told me I wouldn't like the answers. When the meeting ended, I was ordered to silence again. No discussion. No records. The folder was locked away before I'd even left the room. But I couldn't let it go. One night, months later, I went to see one of the surviving crew members, an older machinist named Harris. He'd been there during the blackout, had seen the same shapes in the corridor. When I found him, he was sitting alone in his apartment, curtains drawn, a bottle of whiskey half empty on the table. "They don't leave you," he said before I'd even sat down. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands trembling. "You think it's over, but it's not. They follow you. They find you in the dark, in the silence." I tried to calm him, but he shook his head violently. "They're not subs. They're not Russians. They've been here longer than us. Longer than the sea itself. We're just intruders." His voice broke on that last word. He didn't look at me again. I left shaken, but his words stuck with me. The Navy could bury reports. Commanders could erase tapes. But whatever had touched us in those depths wasn't gone. And I had proof. Late one night, I went back to my locker, to the one item I'd kept against orders. A cassette, a backup reel I'd made out of habit. It wasn't much, just fragments. But when I played it, the sound filled the room. Faint at first, then growing, steady and terrible. Thump, thump. My blood froze. It was there. The heartbeat. Real. Undeniable. But there was something else too. Beneath the pulse, faint, almost inaudible, a voice. Warped, distorted, but human enough to send shivers down my spine. "You can't hide." The tape cut to static. I stared at it for hours, the words echoing in my skull. I thought of Harris, of the men we'd lost, of the Soviets who'd heard the same. And I realized what terrified me most. It wasn't that we'd encountered something beyond comprehension. It was that it had noticed us. And once something like that notices you, it doesn't forget. The ocean always calls you back. No matter how hard I try to bury the memory, no matter how many nights I drown myself in liquor or try to pretend the tape hadn't spoken, I knew it was only a matter of time. Men like me didn't get to walk away. The summons came in the spring of '78. Another patrol, another mission into the black. The captain was the same, though his hair had gone gray at the temples, his face thinner, more haunted. Most of the old crew had been reassigned, or worse, but a few of us remained, bound by silence, dragged back into the belly of the beast. They told us it was standard reconnaissance, shadowing Soviet boomers near the Arctic Circle. But I knew better. They wanted to see if it would happen again, if we'd make contact. The first days were quiet, too quiet. The sonar hummed with the usual chatter, but underneath it I could feel the absence. a gap where the sea should have been alive. The men were on edge, every clang of metal making them jump, every groan of the hull a reminder of what waited. Then, on the 7th night, it came back. The heartbeat. Thump, thump, steady, icy. I didn't need the headset. None of us did. It was in the hull, in our ribs, a rhythm older than blood. The captain didn't even give orders this time. He just stared straight ahead, his knuckles white on the railing, as if bracing for a storm he couldn't command. The sonar lit up with blips. Not one, not dozens, hundreds, encircling us on all sides, tighter and tighter, until the scope was nothing but green. The hull shook violently, as if massive bodies brushed against it, scraping, testing. Men screamed as tools rattled loose, pipes burst, water hissed. The lights flickered red, and in the corridors, they appeared again. Figures, slick, tall, their eyes glowing faintly, their forms bending as if the water itself was shaping them. They flickered in and out, sometimes inside the walls, sometimes standing in the open, watching us. One of them stepped fully into the control room, towering over us, its head nearly grazing the ceiling. Its body shimmered, translucent, as though it was both air and not. The air stank of salt and rot. Its mouth, or the slit that passed for one, opened, and a sound filled the room. Not a roar, not a scream, a word. Leave. The captain snapped, drawing his sidearm again, firing uselessly into the apparition. Bullets tore through air and steel, ricocheting, but the figure didn't move. It only raised one elongated arm and pressed it against the bulkhead. The submarine screamed, metal bent inward, groaning like a wounded animal. Panels ripped loose. Men fell to the deck, clutching their heads as the sound rose higher and higher, a shriek that rattled bones. The captain barked orders, desperate, his voice cracking. Reactor full power. Surface. Now. The engines roared, but the boat barely moved. We were pinned, held in place by something far stronger than steel or water. I stared at the sonar. The massive shape was back, dwarfing us all. Its outline filled the screen, jagged and pulsing, like a mountain come alive. And from it came the voices, layered, countless, whispering in unison. You shouldn't be here. Men sobbed openly. One clawed at the hatch, shrieking to be let out, his nails tearing bloody furrows into the steel. Another slammed his head into the console until he crumpled, lifeless. The thing pressed harder, the hull bowing inward, rivets snapping like gunfire. I was certain we were done, that the sea would crush us like an eggshell. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The figures vanished. The pressure eased. The sonar cleared. The scope empty once more. We surged upward, bursting through the surface with a roar, waves crashing over the sail. The crew staggered, pale, broken, alive only by whatever mercy those things had granted. The captain stood in silence, his pistol limp in his hand, his eyes hollow. Finally, he turned to us, his voice raw. This will not be reported. Do you understand? We nodded, too drained to argue. Back on shore, they stripped us of everything. Our logs, our tapes, even our uniforms. We were discharged quietly, scattered to different corners of the country. No medals, no recognition, just silence. But silence isn't safety, because at night, when the world is still, I hear it again. Faint, but there. Thump, thump. The heartbeat of something waiting in the depths. Something that has always been here. And I know one day, when the ocean is quiet again, it will come back. Not just for me, but for all of us.